How did I wind up here? Approximately 35 to 65,000 years ago, Homo sapiens migrated by canoe to Australia. Climate scientists claim that 13,000 years ago they crossed the frozen land bridge and populated North and South America. With the development of language 50,000 years ago, their planning was less frenetic, and they were able to make better decisions by weighing the advantages of staying versus moving on to more favorable locations. This does not mean that each and every member of the migrating throng has, quote, knowledge aforesaid, respecting the genealogical traits that spread as populations moved throughout several locations. The Germanics and the Huns under Attila, the great conqueror, were regarded by the Greek and Roman empires as, quote, uncivilized, marauding tribes. In fact, they were called barbarians, and they are no longer phenomena of a distant universe. They are, if we follow contemporaneous events, very much in our midst, or certainly not far away. So how did you and I wind up here? Is a question of the utmost significance. Was it a matter of individual choice, or force, or recklessness, or inadvertence? The answer requires a higher pay grade than mine, so I deferred to John Coetzee, a South African writer of excellence who wrote a novel, Waiting for the Barbarians, about torture and state killings, and was awarded the 2003 Nobel Prize in Literature. He was educated at the University of Cape Town and University of Texas at Austin. He told a little story that dates back to the horrors of the plague. A man being drunk, and it being late at night, falls asleep in a doorway in Cripplegate. The dead cart comes on its way. We are still in the year of the plague. And his neighbors, thinking the man dead, places him on the dead cart among the corpses. By and by, the cart moves to the dead pit at Mount Hill, and the carter, his face muffled against the effluvium, lays hold of him to throw him in, and he wakes up and struggles in his bewilderment as to where he had wound up. "Where am I?" says the inebriated man. "You are about to be buried among the dead," says the carter. "But am I dead then?" says the man. This was an amazing twist of fate. My second little story is about barbarians, and it happened in the spring of 1960, in the final months of my undergraduate years as a student of politics, history, and Afro-European slavery. It was definitely my first protest march, and I recall that phase of enlightenment as if it were yesterday. Truly, the entire community of the university at Mona, Jamaica, was incensed at the wanton torture of blacks and callous murders of unarmed demonstrators outside the Sharpeville police station in South Africa. Contrary to conventional wisdom, it was not the less educated, less sophisticated humans that displayed barbarian behavior, but the evil character and brutal conduct of practitioners of the apartheid system that were unashamedly on full display that day. Apartheid's barbarism. The picture below is worth 1,000 words, but the particular angle of the shot is another twist of fate. That's because I was not at the head of the university contingent, but rather at the end of the red-gowned student posse, and immediately ahead of the graduate body and the faculty, all humanitarian activists of a relatively infant academic institution. Fast forward through to the 1966 incarceration of Nelson Mandela, the confessions extracted by torture or anti-apartheid policies, and targeted assassinations of the ruling minority. This continued to the moment in 1990 when the majority leader-to-be of an independent South Africa would be released. Mandela closed his acceptance speech to the crowds that welcomed him by repeating a famous line from an address he'd given at his trial, a trial that began 4 years after my first protest march against the barbarians responsible for the system of apartheid. Quote, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. For we have lived long enough to be able to distinguish the civilized and cultured from the barbarian. I can admire and compare the compassion and decency of a Mandela with the non-violent, uplifting sermons of Martin Luther King to black and white Americans, and before him, the prophetic vision of Jamaica's Marcus Garvey, a militant nationalist, peacemaking labor organizer that ran afoul of strident capitalism and was punished by the feds. The word barbarian did not always have a negative meaning to everyone in the Roman Empire. Around AD 440, the Christian priest Salvian wrote that, quote, "almost all barbarians, at least those who are of one race and kin, love each other, while the Romans persecute each other." Sometimes the poor ordinary Roman turned to the barbarians for the humanity they could find not in their peers, because they cannot bear barbarian inhumanity among the Romans. President Obama had his own take on the barbarian, for its meaning today is far removed from its original Greek roots. When he says a little boy is kidnapped, turned into a child soldier, forced to kill or to be killed, that is slavery. When a little girl is sold by her impoverished family and runs away from home, or is lured by false promises of a better life, and then imprisoned in a brothel and tortured if she resists, that's slavery. It is barbaric and it is evil, and it has no place in a civilized world. This opposition between civilization and its enemies can be recognized as one of the great ongoing themes that we encounter in world history. A report released by the Senate Intelligence Committee detailed brutal interrogation techniques used by the CIA after 9/11. Were these extreme measures morally acceptable? A painful fable. John Coetzee's book begins in an unnamed empire. An old magistrate spends his days adjudicating small cases in a border post, his nights stargazing. But his quiet life is interrupted by Colonel Joel's arrival. Joel has been sent from the capital with news that a rebellion is brewing among barbarian tribes. Investigations have begun, and there are suspects already in custody. At first, the magistrate cooperates and urges the prisoners to speak truthfully, although he notices signs of torture, and one turns up dead. The magistrate becomes concerned and asks Joel, "What if your prisoner is telling the truth, yet finds he is not believed?" But Colonel Joel doesn't believe anything unless it's extracted through pain. To him, pain is truth. All else is subject to doubt. When the magistrate defies Joel's orders, he himself is held and tortured. He now sees that, quote, "a body can entertain notions of justice only as long as it is whole and well, but soon forgets them when its throat is gripped and a pipe is pushed down its gullet and pints of salt water are poured into it. Mandela, the civilized man. South African officials tried to make Mandela disappear, rarely granted him visitations, and made it a criminal offense to publish his photos or any of his writings. But that was not to be, for he gained support while jailed, and the African National Congress made him a symbol of injustice. Free Mandela became a common refrain, while many national governments began after 1980 levying sanctions against South Africa. Mandela never lost his resolve, and by 1988 he was having secret talks with the government about their tenuous political situation. Several black prisoners were released in 1989, and shortly after, de Klerk took the first steps toward reversing apartheid's horribly barbaric policies. After 27 years, Mandela was released at age 71 and was greeted by thousands as he strode with his wife through the prison gates. There was a bit of a scare about addressing the large, overexcited crowds, but he eventually, at Bishop Tutu's urging, returned to the Grand Parade to greet his people in the name of peace, democracy, and freedom for all. There could be nothing of the barbarian or uncivilized in his words. Quote, "Your tireless and heroic sacrifices have made it possible for me to be here today. I, therefore, place the remaining years of my life in your hands." South Africa's first multiracial election made him president in 1994. His people were assured of their inalienable right to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. If only we were to look back carefully into our history, we certainly would know just how we wound up here.